The morning after. Meet your inner Hyde. Imagine this. You wake up after a long night out. Your head feels like a cast iron frying pan, your memory is Swiss cheese, and your phone keeps buzzing with messages from friends who sound way too cheerful for 9 a.m. They're laughing, telling you what you did, the stupid jokes, the weird dancing, the part where you tried to serenade a houseplant. And you sit there thinking, that wasn't me. That had to be someone else. Now imagine saying that and actually meaning it. Because somewhere out there are people who wake up every day like this. No alcohol, no drugs, no wild parties. Just blackout. A hole where a few hours or days of their life should be. And when memories finally surface, they learn that someone else or someone inside the same body has been talking, walking, fighting, stealing, or worse. Sounds like the plot of a horror novel, right? The Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of one body, two minds, one of them very dark. But now picture this. What if the Hyde inside you wasn't alone? What if there were 2 of them? Or 5? Or 24? That's the story we're diving into today. Because in the late 1970s, police in Ohio arrested a man named Billy Milligan, a young, soft-spoken guy who looked more like a substitute art teacher than a violent criminal. He was accused of a series of terrifying attacks on women near a university campus. The evidence was airtight. Witnesses recognized him. His fingerprints were everywhere. And then Billy opened his mouth. And everything changed. He didn't deny the crimes. He didn't confess to them. He said something far stranger. I don't remember any of it. At first, investigators rolled their eyes. Sure, they'd heard this before, the classic I must be blacked out, officer routine. But then Billy behaved differently. Not just confused, but disconnected. Like he wasn't even reacting to the name Billy. Like the person looking back at them wasn't the person they arrested. Over the next weeks, Billy would speak with different accents, different body language, even different handwriting, and introduce himself with different names. Each time, it wasn't an act. It was someone else taking the wheel. One sounded like a polite British intellectual. One like a fierce Yugoslav bouncer ready to snap. One like a terrified child. And others, a far darker, lurking beneath the surface. As investigators watched in shock, one thing became clear. They weren't talking to one man. They were talking to 24 different identities trapped inside the same mind. And one or several of them had committed the crimes. This case would explode across America, ignite a media wildfire, break legal precedent, and turn a quiet young man into a cultural phenomenon. Books, documentaries, courtroom battles, accusations of manipulation, arguments among psychiatrists that still haven't stopped. But before all of that, before the fame, the fear, the films, the lawsuits, there is one simple question we need to answer. How does a mind shatter into pieces? And what happens when each piece begins to live a life of its own? The Campus Predator, October 1977. Ohio State University, the place of loud dorm hallways, cold autumn mornings, and students running late to class with coffee they can barely afford. Life here felt predictable until it suddenly didn't. Because over just 2 weeks, fear slipped onto the campus like a shadow. Nobody noticed until it was too late. 3 women, 3 separate attacks. Same pattern, same nightmare. Each story started the same way: a parking lot, a car door, a man stepping out of nowhere. Not a monster with a mask, not some horror movie silhouette. A normal guy. White, mid-20s, long brown hair, sideburns, aviator glasses. He could have been a grad student. Your neighbor. But then the normal vanished. The attacker would lean in close, whispering things that made no sense, shifting moods like a broken radio. One moment polite, almost gentle. The next, cold and threatening, warning that people from a certain family would take revenge if she talked. Sometimes he spoke with an accent of British, maybe Eastern European. Sometimes his eyes rolled upward, like someone else behind them was trying to wake up. And then had mumbled to himself. Not the nervous kind of mumbling, but like he was having a full argument with someone nobody else could see. That was the moment every victim described the same terrifying thought. Something is wrong with this man, not just dangerous, wrong. After the attacks, he stole credit cards, demanded money, made the women drive to remote places, or assaulted them right there between rows of parked cars. He kept switching tones, switching faces, as if different people were slipping on the same skin, one after another. The campus went into panic mode. Female students stopped walking alone at night. Professors insisted on escorting students to their cars. Police set up patrols on roofs. Volunteers walked the campus carrying flashlights like lanterns in some modern-day witch hunt. Local news stations were practically salivating on the campus rapist, headlines screamed. Every night, TVS across Ohio flickered with warnings, sketches, interviews, speculation. Parents called their kids non-stop. Reporters hinted at something political, radical, organized. Why? Because several victims remembered something bizarre. The attacker claimed he was part of an underground revolutionary group of the Weather Underground, known for bombings, jailbreaks, and anti-government chaos. Was the predator a political radical, a delusional liar, or someone connected to something bigger? No one knew, but the fear was real. Every female student now checked the backseat before getting into her car. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every stranger looked like the sketch posted on every dorm hallway wall. But here's the thing. This predator wasn't a ghost. He made a mistake. A single, stupid mistake. On the car of his third victim, he left something behind. Something invisible. Something that could speak louder than any witness. A fingerprint. And that fingerprint would lead police straight to a young man living just a few miles away, a man who would soon become one of the most infamous names in American criminal history. A man named Billy Milligan. The attack spree was horrifying. But what police were about to uncover was far stranger. Weather Underground. Chaos in the air. Before we jump into the rest, we need to understand why the police hesitated at first and why the campus attacker sounded like a man living several different lives at once. Because the 1970s in America weren't calm. They weren't simple. They weren't safe. They were a storm. And in that storm was a group that terrified the government, confused the public, and fascinated an entire generation. The Weather Underground. Imagine a group of radical students, long hair, denim jackets, anti-war slogans, but with one upgrade. Instead of protests, they planted bombs. Instead of petitions, they staged jailbreaks. Instead of chanting on campus lawns, they were slipping into federal buildings with explosives under their coats. These weren't nameless extremists hiding in the shadows. They were educated, charismatic, idealistic, and very, very angry. The Vietnam War, civil rights clashes, government scandals. They believed America was broken, and they wanted to smash the system back. So they blew up a bathroom in the U.S. Capitol, then the Pentagon. They helped a famous Harvard psychologist escape prison. They set off small bombs as political statements, leaving behind letters, threats, manifestos. The whole country wondered, is this rebellion or domestic terrorism in a college hoodie? So when the campus attacker in Ohio started bragging to victims about being part of the Weather Underground, when he whispered that the organization would come after them if they talked, people listened. Because in 1977, those words were enough to freeze your blood. And here's what made everything worse. The victims weren't describing a typical criminal. They were describing a man whose behavior kept shifting as if he was trying on different personalities like masks. He spoke with a British accent, then no accent, then an accent nobody could place. He called himself a soldier, then a partisan, then a member of a secret family. He claimed he was being watched. He talked about coded messages. He referenced political violence like it was part of his daily schedule. To the victims, it felt like something bigger was happening, like the attacker wasn't working alone, or maybe wasn't even in control of himself. But here's the truth. The Weather Underground had nothing to do with the attacks. The real danger wasn't outside. It wasn't a radical group hiding in the shadows. The danger was inside the man who committed the crimes. And the more the police looked at the case, the stranger it became. Because while students were checking their backseats for intruders, while police cars circled the parking lots like sharks, while the media speculated about political conspiracies, the attacker himself was unraveling. He left fingerprints. He left mistakes. He left pieces of his identity scattered behind him like breadcrumbs. And those breadcrumbs were leading detectives straight to one person. Not a radical activist. Not a political rebel. A quiet, troubled 22-year-old who lived just minutes from campus. A man the police were about to knock on the door of without realizing that behind that door was not one suspect, but 24. And the moment they placed him in handcuffs, they would discover something even stranger. Billy Milligan didn't know he had been caught. Because Billy Milligan didn't even know what Billy Milligan had done. The arrest. A man who wasn't there. The fingerprint hit came back fast. A perfect match. Police looked at the name on the report and paused. William Stanley Milligan. Age: 22. Previous charges: assault, robbery. Recently released. Lives 5 miles from campus. They didn't need a manhunt. No helicopters. No stakeouts. Just a drive to a small, quiet apartment building where a young man lived with second-hand furniture and a life that looked painfully ordinary. The detectives expected resistance, a panic, excuses, maybe a desperate attempt to run. They did not expect this. When officers knocked, a confused young man opened the door like he had just woken up from a dream he didn't choose. He didn't scream. He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He blinked, scanned their faces, and said in a dazed, almost childlike voice, "Is something wrong?" Inside his apartment, police found the things they expected, but hoped not to. A gun. Stolen items belonging to the victims. Cartridges that matched the bullets he had fired while threatening one of the women. Game over. Case closed. Right? Not even close. During the arrest, Billy acted as if Billy was the last person in the room. When officers said his name, he didn't respond. Not refused. Not ignored. He genuinely seemed to not recognize it. Then, just as the officers cuffed him, Billy said something that froze everyone. "There's a bomb in my dresser." For a moment, the room tightened. SWAT was called. The building was partially cleared. But when they opened the dresser, no bomb. Just a showbox filled with wires and batteries, like a child's attempt at pretending what a bomb might look like. Not a threat. Just odd. So odd it felt like a performance, but a bad one. Too bad to be intentional. In holding, things only got stranger. Billy sat in silence, mumbling to himself. Then he slammed his head into the wall. Then he curled up and refused to answer questions. Then he stood like a statue, staring at a corner as if he expected the corner to stare back. But the real shock came the next morning. A guard walked by his cell and saw something terrifying. Billy had ripped the sink off the wall. Not loosened. Not cracked. Ripped out. Then, impossibly, he slipped out of his handcuffs. And not by breaking them, but by contorting his arms in a way that looked practiced, almost professional. The guards asked him how he did it. He just stared at them, wide-eyed. "I don't know." That phrase would return again and again. "I don't know what's happening. I don't remember anything. I don't understand why I'm here." To police, it sounded like an act of a desperate, sloppy attempt to dodge responsibility. And honestly, who could blame them? They had caught their man. The evidence was unbeatable. But something didn't fit. This wasn't the behavior of a cold, calculating predator. This was someone fragmented, broken, terrified of things no one else could see. And if the police thought their arrest was strange, they were about to enter the true nightmare. Because Billy hadn't even begun to reveal the people living inside him. And soon and very soon investigators would realize. The man they arrested wasn't the man who committed the crimes. Not according to the voices inside his head. The tests that broke reality. The court ordered a psychological evaluation, a routine step for violent crime. Doctors expected a standard checklist. Is he faking? Is he depressed? Does he understand right from wrong? Simple. Predictable. By the book. Billy Milligan was about to burn that book to ashes. The first test was an IQ assessment. A basic one. Nothing complicated. Day 1. Billy scored like a child struggling through elementary school, confused, slow, overwhelmed. Day 4. He took the exact same test. Same questions. Same order. This time he scored like a gifted college professor. Same man. Same room. Same test. To completely different minds. Then came the personality evaluations. Rorschach tests. Drawings. Story prompts. Billy didn't just give different answers, he gave answers in different handwriting, different vocabulary, different emotional tones, like someone had swapped out the person sitting in the chair. One drawing looked like something a terrified 8-year-old would make. Another looked like a disciplined, technically skilled adult's work. Then suddenly a loud, chaotic scribble of violent, bold strokes, sharp shapes, something that felt like anger trapped on paper. The doctors stared at each other. This wasn't a mood swing. This wasn't acting. It looked like multiple people were taking the same test through one body. Still, psychologists have seen everything, or at least, they think they have. So they pushed harder. One doctor asked directly, "Who are you?" Billy blinked, and then something shifted. His posture straightened. His breathing slowed. His voice dropped into a calm, almost aristocratic tone. "My name is Arthur." Arthur spoke like he had walked straight out of a BBC detective series. British accent. Perfect grammar. Cold logic. Arthur explained things Billy never could. He talked about his own rules, his own memories, his own role inside Billy's mind. The psychologists barely had time to process this before Arthur suddenly stopped mid-sentence, eyes fluttering like a glitching screen, and another voice emerged. Rough. Harsh. Heavily accented. "I am Ragen." This one didn't sound British. He sounded Eastern European, Yugoslav, maybe. A completely different rhythm, posture, look in his eyes. Ragen claimed to be the keeper of hate, the protector, the one who came out when violence threatened. He talked about strength, about surviving, about taking punches so Billy wouldn't have to. The doctors watched, stunned, as a third personality surfaced hours later. A smaller voice. Higher. Timid. David, 8 years old. The keeper of pain. And then Tommy. And Sean. And Christine. And on and on. Within days, the team had identified 10 separate identities, each with its own age, accent, interests, and memories. 10 minds. 1 body. It was impossible. It was unbelievable. It was medically documented. And then came the moment that changed the entire case forever. During a session, one of the doctors asked gently, "Billy, can you tell us what you remember?" Silence. Then a small, trembling voice said, "I don't know who Billy is. The real Billy, the core identity, hadn't been conscious for years. He had slept through his life like a prisoner inside his own skull. And someone else or many someone else's had been living it for him. The attacks, the robberies, the violence. Each identity denied parts of it. Each identity blamed another. And the more the doctors probed, the more one terrifying question grew. If no single person inside Billy remembered the crimes, who, exactly, were they supposed to put on trial? Inside a broken mind. What is did? Before this case spirals into the full madness it becomes, we need to answer one question, the question every cop, every journalist, every juror, and every doctor asked. What the hell is happening inside Billy Milligan's head? Because what investigators were seeing wasn't schizophrenia, wasn't psychosis, wasn't acting. It was something far stranger, a disorder so rare, so controversial, so misunderstood, that even the experts argued about whether it was real. Today we call it dissociative identity disorder, or DID. Back then it had a more dramatic name. Multiple personality disorder. Sounds like a horror movie diagnosis. But here's how it works and why Billy became the most famous case in American history. The mind's emergency exit. Imagine your brain has a panic button, a switch that flips when something unbearable happens. Most people have coping mechanisms. Denial, repression, distraction, humor. But a small fraction of people, especially children, experience trauma so devastating that their minds do something extreme. They split. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Their consciousness fractures into different selves, different identities, different internal people, each holding a piece of the pain the child couldn't survive alone. It's not magic. It's survival. One personality holds the memories. Another holds the fear. Another learns to fight. Another learns to hide. Another tries to pretend nothing ever happened. These identities don't develop overnight. They form in childhood, usually before age 9, when the brain is still soft clay, not hardened concrete. And in Billy's case, that clay was smashed with a sledgehammer. But we'll get to his childhood soon. For now, understand this. DID is a switch that flips. It's a house with broken walls and doors that slam open on their own. The strange rules of a divided mind. DID has a few features that stunned the investigators studying Billy. 1. Amnesia between identities. One identity lives an entire day. Another wakes up with no idea where they are. Imagine losing hours, then days, then years. Your life becomes a movie someone else is watching for you. 2. Different skills and abilities. One identity might shave with the left hand. Another writes poetry. A third speaks a language you don't consciously know. Billy had identities who could draw like professionals, others who spoke Serbian, others who were children, and even one blind identity, despite Billy having no medical blindness. 3. Different physical responses. Heart rate, posture, reaction time, even allergies. Some identities needed glasses. Others didn't. Doctors watched these changes in real time as one person slid out and another slid in. The rise of the split mind cases. Billy wasn't the first. In the 1950s, the world heard of 3 faces of Eve, a housewife with 3 personalities. She became a media sensation. Then came Sybil, even more dramatic, a woman with 16 personalities. A blockbuster book, a film, a cultural explosion. Suddenly, America became fascinated with the idea. Could a single mind hold many selves? Some doctors believed it wholeheartedly. Others said it was fantasy, manipulation, bad therapy, or even hypnosis gone wrong. By the time Billy was arrested in 1977, it was a medical Cold War. Half the experts said it was real, half said it was theater. But Billy did something none of them expected. He didn't show 2 personalities, or 3, or 16. He showed 24. And unlike Sybil or Eve, these identities weren't coaxed out by a therapist with leading questions. They appeared instantly, violently, without hesitation. British accents, Slavic accents, childlike voices. A conceptual artist, a martial artist, a protector, a manipulator, a girl who wrote poetry and stole control of the body at night. 24 identities, each claiming, "I am not him." And in court, this mattered. Because if Billy didn't commit the crimes and the personalities who did commit them were not the same person legally, how do you punish a crime committed by one mind inside the body of another? That question wasn't just philosophical. It would explode into a legal nightmare. A childhood built for breaking. To understand how Billy's mind shattered into 24 pieces, you have to go way back to the place where it all started. Because monsters aren't born. Sometimes they're made. And the person who made Billy's monsters was waiting for him at home. A father lost, a nightmare found. Billy's biological father died when he was still young, a quiet man with a gentle voice who left behind more questions than memories. Sudden death, inconclusive reports, a whisper of suicide, a whisper of accident, no real closure. His mother, exhausted, vulnerable, desperate for stability, remarried. And that's when the real story begins. The man she married, Billy Milligan, walked into their lives like a storm, wearing a friendly smile. To the neighbors he was normal. To the world he was invisible. But behind closed doors he became the architect of Billy's broken mind. The barn. Every horror story has a place where everything changes. For Billy, it was the old wooden barn behind the house, a structure that smelled of hay, dust, and fear. He was 8 years old when Billy first dragged him inside. And what happened in that barn didn't just break a child. It rewired a brain. Billy beat him, humiliated him, forced him into positions no child should ever experience, threatened him, made him keep secrets, made him believe he deserved it. Billy's childhood wasn't childhood, it was a training program for trauma. When the pain was too much, when his mind couldn't handle what his body was living through, something inside him cracked. And through that crack the first altar stepped in. The first split. Children can't run from monsters. But sometimes their minds can. One identity took the fear. Another took the shame. Another learned to escape inside imagination. Another learned to fight. Another learned to hide. Billy didn't create these personalities. His mind summoned them like emergency responders rushing toward the flames. One altar held the memory of a specific beating. Another held the memory of specific words. Another held the emotions Billy couldn't process. A fourth took the rage. A fifth took the pain. While the real Billy of the core Billy, it went somewhere deep, deep inside and slept. A house with too many doors. As the abuse continued, more identities formed. Some were only fragments. Some were children who never grew up. Some were adults with skills Billy never learned, the protectors, the fighters, the strategists. When Billy was 12, Chalmers' cruelty escalated. He buried the boy alive in a pit behind the house, his head just above ground, dirt pressed against his chest, suffocating him. Billy remembered the sky. He remembered the dirt. He remembered the voice screaming inside him. "It's not happening to me. It's happening to him." And with that, another personality stepped forward. Billy's mind didn't fracture once. It fractured again and again and again. Every trauma was a hammer. Every hammer swing created another crack. By the time Billy reached adolescence, he wasn't one person anymore. He was a crowd. A sleeping core. When psychologists later asked Billy to recall his childhood, he couldn't. Not just because he forgot, but because he wasn't there. He was buried beneath layers of personalities, sealed away like a child locked in a panic room. The people who lived his life, who took the blows, who learned to survive, who grew into artists, fighters, protectors, and criminals, were not Billy at all. They were the ones who endured his childhood for him. And when the crimes at the university happened in 1977, it wasn't Billy at the steering wheel. It was one of the identities born in that barn, in that dirt, under Chalmers' shadow. So when Billy said, "I don't remember," it wasn't manipulation. It wasn't strategy. It was true. The boy who should have grown into the man who stood in that courtroom was locked somewhere inside, still 8 years old, still in the barn, still hiding from his stepfather. And now the psychiatrists investigating his case realized something terrifying. If Billy didn't live his own childhood, how could he possibly live his own adulthood? The 24. Inside Billy's internal city by now, investigators knew something was wrong with Billy Milligan, terribly wrong. But they had no idea how wrong until the floodgates opened. Because inside Billy wasn't just trauma, not just confusion, not just fragments. Inside him lived an entire population, a system, a hierarchy, a hidden world with rules, leaders, outcasts, and a long, long list of identities. The psychiatrists called it multiplicity. Billy called it the family. And once the doors opened, they walked out one by one. Arthur the architect, the first to speak, was Arthur, and when he did, the temperature of the room practically changed. Calm, cold, precise. A British intellectual who could explain medical terminology like he had a degree in it. Arthur knew the history of the system, the rules, the dangers, the others. He wasn't just an alter. He was the librarian of Billy's mind, the one who sorted memories, controlled switches, kept order. Arthur introduced the others like someone giving a guided tour through a haunted mansion. But then the door slammed open. Ragen, or the protector Ragen Vadiskovich. Slavic accent. Deep, heavy voice. A presence that felt like a bar fight about to happen. He called himself the Keeper of Hate. His job? Absorb violence so Billy didn't have to. He could lift heavier weight than the other identities. He painted. He did pull-ups until his muscles shook. He once broke out of handcuffs by brute force. Ragen didn't ask to be born. Trauma created him. And he was willing to hurt people, not because he wanted to, but because he believed it kept Billy alive. Christine, the lost girl, a tiny voice. A tiny personality. Christine, 3 years old, soft-spoken, fearful. She came out during tests, during stress, during memories too dark for anyone older to face. She liked coloring books. She spelled her name Christn. She had a speech impediment. Her existence broke doctors' hearts. Because she wasn't acting. She was a real 3-year-old living inside an adult body. Tommy, the escape artist. Tommy had skills Billy never learned: lock-picking, electronics, quick thinking, fast reflexes. He was the one who slipped out of handcuffs. The one who dismantled the bomb in Billy's dresser, which turned out to be a bunch of wires arranged by a different alter. The one who could hotwire a car in under a minute. Tommy said he wasn't violent. He was just trying to get them all out of trouble. But trouble always followed them. David, the keeper of pain. David was 8 years old, the one who felt the pain the others refused. When doctors asked him about the barn, he trembled. He remembered the dirt, the pit, the voice telling him to hold it, to take it. David had the saddest eyes the staff had ever seen. He took every tear so Billy didn't have to. Sean, the deaf boy, half deaf, speech difficulties, terrified of conflict. Sean rarely spoke. He didn't understand much of what was happening, but he existed. And that alone told doctors everything. This wasn't pretending. This wasn't acting. This was a mind splintered so deeply that each fragment formed its own reality. And then the unapproved ones. For weeks, the team thought they had cataloged everyone, 10 identities in total. Difficult, unusual, but manageable. Then Arthur revealed a chilling truth. There were more identities. 14 more. Hidden. Forbidden. Locked away in the undesirable group. They were the rebels. The rule breakers. The ones Arthur and Ragen kept suppressed because they were dangerous, or unpredictable, or simply unwanted. Among them was Adalana, a quiet, withdrawn 19-year-old who wrote poetry, felt lonely, craved affection, and who the other personalities accused of committing the sex crimes. Her voice was soft. Her posture timid. But her admission and the accusation against her would change the entire case forever. Because if Adalana committed the crimes, what does that make Billy? guilty, innocent, or something in between, a passenger trapped behind the wheel of his own body. The identities argued. The doctors debated. The courtroom braced itself. Because now the legal system had to decide. Can you punish a crime committed by a person who exists only inside someone else's mind? The therapy sessions. A courtroom inside one mind. If investigators thought they had seen chaos, therapy with Billy Milligan would prove them wrong. Because the moment doctors tried to talk to Billy, they discovered something terrifying. Billy wasn't there. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Literally, his core personality was missing. Gone. Dormant. Locked behind walls, the other identities built years earlier. So the therapists weren't treating one patient. They were treating an entire cast of characters trapped in one skull, characters who didn't always like each other, didn't trust each other, and definitely didn't agree on who should be in charge. Welcome to the strangest group therapy in history. The shifting room. A normal session went like this. The doctor would ask a question, Billy's eyes would unfocus, his expression would twitch, and suddenly the person sitting in front of them changed. Voice, accent, posture, vibe. It could happen 10 times in 5 minutes. One moment Arthur spoke calmly about the rules of the internal world. The next, Ragen erupted into the room with a heavy Serbian growl. Then a tiny 3-year-old's voice whispered for crayons. Doctors weren't dealing with personalities. They were dealing with inhabitants who each convinced they were separate people. And in a way, they were. The Council of 10. As therapy continued, the identities began cooperating barely. Arthur, the British intellectual, called mandatory meetings. Ragen, the protector, enforced them with his brutal authority. These meetings weren't metaphorical. The alters described them like actual gatherings inside their shared mental space, which Arthur called the ascendant. The ascendant was the control room, the cockpit, the driver's seat. Whoever held the ascendant controlled the body. For years, the system had been a chaotic free-for-all. Now, under the threat of prison, Arthur and Ragen tried to rewrite the power structure. They forced the others to follow rules. No stealing the body at night, no committing crimes, no switching without a reason, no putting Billy in danger, no hiding information from the doctors. But there was one rule that overshadowed them all. No one is allowed to let Billy out. He is not strong enough. The core personality, the original Billy, was treated like a fragile relic, a child too traumatized to live. The therapists asked, "Where is he now?" The identities answered with chilling simplicity, "He is asleep. We keep him safe." But safe from what? That answer only revealed itself slowly, painfully, and through tears. The first attempt at integration, therapists knew the goal. Unify the identities. Merge them. Reconnect the fractured pieces into one functional person. But imagine trying to merge 24 people, some children, some adults, some violent, some terrified, all fighting for control. Integration was like trying to glue lightning together. One early session ended with Ragen punching a wall so hard his knuckles split. Christine cried because she didn't want to die. Tommy argued that merging would destroy his skills. Arthur lectured that integration was illogical and dangerous. And Adalana, an alter accused of the assaults, refused to speak at all. The therapists realized something horrifying. Some identities didn't want to merge. Some identities didn't want to disappear. Some identities wanted the body all for themselves. They weren't just personalities. They were residents at war. The awakening of Billy. After weeks of sessions, something unexpected happened. Something none of them were prepared for. Arthur paused mid-sentence. Ragen withdrew. Christine fell silent. Then slowly a confused, fragile, shaking voice emerged. "Where am I?" Billy. The real Billy. The boy who had been locked away since childhood. His face was blank, terrified, disoriented, like someone waking up from a decades-long coma. He didn't recognize the room. He didn't know the year. He didn't understand why adults were staring at him. He asked for his mother. He asked if the barn was gone. He asked if the man was coming back. The therapists realized something heartbreaking. Billy wasn't 22 years old. He was emotionally still 8. And now this childlike core personality had to learn that. He was an adult. He had committed crimes he didn't remember. He was facing prison, and inside his own head were 23 other people who lived his life without him. Billy broke down, trembling, sobbing, screaming no, over and over. It was the first time anyone saw the true victim inside the monster history remembered. A boy who had slept through his own life because living it was too painful. But the return of Billy created a new, urgent problem. Who, exactly, should stand trial? The alters. The body. The boy. The protector. The criminal. The victim. The courtroom was about to step into impossible territory. The trial. The first man ever acquitted by did imagine walking into a courtroom expecting a standard criminal case, a predator, 3 victims, a pile of evidence so solid you could build a courthouse on it. But instead, you walk straight into a psychological earthquake. Because the man sitting at the defendant's table doesn't just claim he's innocent, he claims he wasn't there. Not metaphorically, literally. And as wild as that sounds, the craziest part is that the system or the judges, the psychiatrists, even the prosecutors, as slowly start to believe him. Welcome to the trial of Billy Milligan, the first person in American history to be found not guilty by reason of insanity based on multiple personality disorder, what we now call DID. From day one, the courtroom felt wrong, like the air pressure had dropped. Prosecutors entered confident. They had fingerprints, victim IDs, matching shell casings, stolen credit cards, and the holy trinity of forensic slam dunks. But on the defense bench sat a man who looked lost. Not calculating. Not defiant. Lost like he'd just woken up inside someone else's trial. And when the interrogations began, the confusion deepened. Ask him about the assaults, he stares blankly. Show him the evidence, he acts like it belongs to another universe. Call him Billy, and he doesn't even respond. Then the psychiatrists take the stand, and suddenly the courtroom becomes a stage for something no legal system was prepared to judge. They show tapes, hours of interviews where the man in the defendant's chair speaks with different voices, different postures, different accents. A meticulous British intellectual, a volatile Yugoslav communist, a shy teenage girl, and none of them are Billy. The prosecution bursts into laughter at first. Come on. You expect us to believe this? Voices, accents, split personalities. This is acting. Except then they watch the tapes closer. Then they witness a live switcheroo right there, in the interrogation room. Then they test him, push him, corner him. And the switches happen so fast and so clean, even trained investigators can't spot the moment of transformation. One prosecutor later admitted, if it was fake, he was the greatest actor he'd ever seen. Hollywood level. And the psychiatrists are unanimous, which almost never happens in insanity cases. All of them say the same thing. Billy Milligan's mind is a fractured house with multiple tenants and only one front door. And during the rapes, robberies, and kidnappings, that front door was locked to the real Billy. The defense doesn't argue that the crimes never happened. They argue that the person responsible wasn't the person on trial. An alter, not Billy, took control. That alter knew what he was doing, but Billy didn't. The legal system was paralyzed. How do you convict a man when his consciousness wasn't present during the crime? How do you cross-examine someone who doesn't remember the night his body assaulted 3 women? How do you punish a mind that was asleep while another identity committed the act? The judge faces a historical decision. The evidence is real, but so is the disorder. The crimes were intentional, but not intentional by Billy. So he does what no American judge had ever dared to do. He rules that Billy Milligan is not guilty by reason of insanity. The campus rapist walks out of court without a prison sentence and into a psychiatric institution instead. The first man in U.S. history acquitted because the law couldn't decide who, exactly, was sitting at the defendant's table. But the ruling does something far bigger. It hits the justice system like a meteor. Because now the door is opened legally, publicly, dangerously to the idea that a person can commit a crime and blame another self entirely. And America's courts will never look at insanity the same way again. The flood. Proven cases, fakes, and a nation obsessed with did. If the Billy Milligan trial cracked the door open, what happened next blew it off the hinges. Because after his verdict, America didn't just get curious about multiple personalities, it became obsessed. Courtrooms, talk shows, psychiatrists' offices, as suddenly everyone had an alter ego waiting to take the stand. But here's the twist. Some of these cases were heartbreakingly real, and some were some of the most brazen manipulations the justice system had ever seen. Welcome to the aftermath of the Milligan verdict, when the question was, does DID exist? But how many people are faking it? At the center of the first major wave is Juanita Maxwell, the hotel maid from Florida. The evidence against her is crushing. A murdered guest, a violent struggle, scratches on her arms. But Juanita sits in the interrogation room timid, shaking, insisting she remembers nothing. Then something terrifying happens. Her head drops. Her shoulders stiffen. She looks up and she's someone else. A new voice. A new stare. A new posture. And this alter named Wanda doesn't just confess, she brags. She reenacts the murder step by step, smiling. A witness in the courtroom later said it looked like two different women wearing the same skin. The jury is stunned. Psychiatrists testify she's not acting. And just like Billy, Juanita is found not guilty by reason of insanity. For the justice system, it's official. Milligan wasn't a one-off. Didkin commit murder. But that victory doesn't last long. Because while real cases surface, so do the pretenders. Enter Arthur Shawcross, the Genesee River killer, a man who murdered 14 people and blamed who else his supposed alters. But unlike Billy or Juanita, Shawcross' transformations look off. Forced. Performative. Convenient. One psychiatrist later testified. If this was did, then in the Queen of England. The jury agrees. Shawcross gets to 150 years. And then there's Billy Joe Harris, the Twilight rapist. He claims multiple personalities until investigators find phone recordings of him laughing about the performance. He lands in prison for life. The pattern becomes clear. The more famous Did becomes, the more criminals try to wear it like a Halloween costume. But Did isn't just showing up in crime scenes. It's suddenly everywhere on talk shows, magazine covers, celebrity interviews. There's Truddy Chase, who claims to live with 92 different personalities and refuses integration therapy, choosing instead to coexist with them like a board of directors inside her skull. There's Herschel Walker, NFL superstar turned political figure, publicly stating he had multiple personalities, one of which allegedly held a gun to his wife's head. Was he telling the truth? Was it PR? No one could say anymore. America didn't know whether to sympathize or roll its eyes. Because how do you judge a disorder that can be real, tragic, and life-destroying but also weaponized by predators trying to escape accountability? Psychiatrists begin fighting among themselves. Some say Did is underdiagnosed. Others argue it's a therapy-created illusion. Courts demand stricter evaluations. Defense attorneys grow bolder. Prosecutors grow suspicious. And the public? It starts to ask the same uncomfortable question echoing across every headline. If a mind can split, can guilt split too? Billy Milligan's verdict hadn't just changed one life. It reshaped an entire legal landscape, creating a world where every defendant claiming an alter ego might be a victim or a master manipulator. And the line between the two was getting thinner with every new case that walked into court. After the verdict, fame, scandal, and the great escape, Billy Milligan walked out of the courtroom not as a free man, but as something even stranger. A celebrity mental patient. A man who avoided prison not by denying his crimes, but by convincing the world that he hadn't been there when they happened. But what happens when someone with 24 personalities becomes famous? Chaos. Absolute, cinematic chaos. Billy is sent to a state psychiatric hospital, but hospital is generous. No bars on the windows. Weekend passes. Visitors. A staff trying to treat not one patient but 24. And within weeks, everyone realizes something unsettling. Billy loves the attention. He paints. He performs. He switches personalities on command or maybe not on command, and that's even scarier. Doctors record hours of footage. Arthur lecturing like a British professor. Ragen shouting in his Slavic accent. Adalana whispering in soft, trembling tones. Then, it happens. A new personality appears. Then another. And another. 14 new alters, the ones even the original 10 didn't know about. Some are petty thieves. Some are impulsive. One is violent. And all of them are furious that Billy is suddenly a star. Because outside the hospital walls, something unexpected is happening. A best-selling author of Daniel Keyes, the man who wrote Flowers for Algernon, decides to write Billy's life story. Weekly interviews turn into months of research. Paintings from Billy's alter sell for $1,000 each. Visitors treat him like a true crime wonderkind. And for the first time in his life, Billy feels powerful. But the public is livid. News spreads that the campus rapist is signing autographs, selling artwork, buying a car. Women's rights groups protest outside the hospital. Politicians promise new laws. Some want him locked up forever. Others want every penny he earns sent to his victims. And then the scandals begin. Several female patients claim Billy flirted with them. One says they drank together. Another suggests something happened behind closed doors. Doctors can't prove anything, but the smell of impropriety hangs thick in the air. Administrators panic. Too much media. Too much pressure. Too much Billy. So they transfer him out to a stricter, harsher hospital. No more freedom. No weekend passes. No art shows. Just locked doors, surveillance, and heavy medication. And Billy, he deteriorates fast. The new doctors don't believe in Did. They treat him like a manipulator. They drug him into a fog. Personalities vanish. Billy complains he can't think straight. He says they're killing him from the inside out. And one day he decides has done. July 1986. Billy Milligan simply walks out. No alarms. No dramatic chase. Just gone. For 5 months, he lives under an alias, bouncing between states, staying with friends who still believe he's a victim of the system. His trail crosses the Canadian border. Then he resurfaces in the American South, and the FBI finally catches up. You'd think this would be it, the end, the fall, the return to chains. But no. Doctors review him again. They decide he's stable, he's no longer dangerous, he's safe for outpatient treatment. And in 1988, in a move that baffles half the country, Billy Milligan is released. No prison time. No locked wards. Just out. He buys a farm. Dates a new girlfriend. Tinkers with screenplays. And then, like some bizarre Hollywood fever dream, he moves to Los Angeles. Because now, Hollywood wants him. James Cameron, yes, that James Cameron meets with Billy about a film adaptation. Producers call. Actors line up. Johnny Depp, Sean Penn, Leonardo DiCaprio. For Billy, this is the ultimate twist. He might become the star of his own disorder. But money complications, legal battles, and Billy's own ego sabotage everything. The studios walk away. The deals collapse. And Billy Milligan fades into the shadows of California, broke and aging. His legend grows. But his life shrinks. A man once split into 24 pieces ends up alone. Ill and forgotten. But his story isn't over, because the next chapter asks the question the world has been afraid to ask for 40 years. Was Billy Milligan truly sick? Or did he outplay the system better than anyone in American history? Next chapter we take on the myth and the truth, the legend, the lie, and the unsolved mystery of Billy Milligan. By the time Billy Milligan reached his final years, the world that once chased him, studied him, adored him, and hated him had moved on. Hollywood stopped calling. The tabloids lost interest. The psychiatrists who once fought over his diagnosis retired. And Billy, the man with 24 personalities, the campus predator, the psychiatric celebrity, slipped quietly into a life nobody expected. A ghost on a farm in rural Ohio. He grew a beard. He kept to himself. He painted. He avoided cameras. The personalities that once exploded onto videotapes now appeared rarely, or maybe not at all. And in 2014, at just 59 years old, Billy Milligan died of cancer. No personalities at the bedside. No final interview. No public statement. Just silence. But Billy's death didn't end his story. It ignited the biggest controversy of all. Because if Billy's case opened America to did another case of our more famous threatened to expose it as a constructed illusion. Her name was Shirley Mason. You know her better as Sybil, the woman whose story launched the global fascination with multiple personalities decades before Milligan. Her biography sold millions. Her therapy tapes became mandatory teaching. Her alter personalities vicious, childish, seductive, terrified, defined it for an entire generation. But here's what the public didn't know. In the 1990s, researchers uncovered a secret. Shirley had written a letter to her psychiatrist confessing she'd made the personalities up. Not because she wanted to, but because the doctor encouraged her, rewarded her, shaped her. And even worse, some of the breakthroughs happened while Shirley was drugged or heavily sedated with medications known to cause hallucinations and false memories. The scandal hit psychiatry like a nuclear blast. If Sybil, the most famous DID patient in history, had been guided, influenced, even accidentally created, then how many other cases were real? And that's when the spotlight swung back to Billy. Doctors split into two camps. Camp A. Billy was genuine. His trauma was real. His switches were involuntary and verifiable. He wasn't faking, he was shattered. Can't be. Billy was brilliant. Manipulative. An abused kid who learned to survive by becoming whoever adults needed him to be, as psychiatrists included. A man who watched the system closely and played it perfectly. Some pointed out how conveniently his personalities appeared during legal pressure. Others noted inconsistencies in accents, memories, skills. A few claimed that Billy's alters grew more complex the moment Daniel Keyes began writing his book, as if Billy were leveling up his performance. But there was one fact no one could ignore. In all the years after his release, with no cameras, no doctors, no audience, Billy rarely switched at all. Was that healing? Or was it the end of an act? The truth is uncomfortable, infuriating, and impossible to settle. Because Billy Milligan left behind no confession, no denial, no clarity. Only a question that cuts straight into the heart of psychology, law, and human identity. Can a person truly split into many? Or can a desperate mind learn to mimic it so well the world believes the illusion? Billy's story forces us to confront something darker. Sometimes the human mind is a maze, and sometimes it's a magician. Maybe Billy was a victim. Maybe he was a genius manipulator. Or maybe, and this is the most unsettling possibility, he was both. A boy broken by trauma who learned to survive by becoming many. And in the end, whether he was 20 for people or just one, Billy Milligan changed America. Changed psychiatry. Changed the courtroom. Changed the conversation about identity forever. His life ends in silence. But his question remains, echoing across textbooks, trials, and late-night true crime debates. Did Billy Milligan deceive the world? Or did the world fail to understand him? That's the end of his story. But the mystery? That will never die.